Hello, everybody. This is Kiana Park from SpyPalm Partners. I'm the facilitator for this webinar. Welcome to Webinar 8 in our 12-part Transportation Asset Management webinar series, sponsored by FHWA and AASHTO. The topic of today's webinar is Data Needs, Issues, and Governance for Improvement of Highway Assets.
Yep. Good afternoon or good morning, everybody. Federal Highway Administration is pleased to present this webinar in cooperation with the AASHTO Subcommittee on Asset Management. With this webinar, Data Needs, Issues, and Governance for Improved Management of Highway Assets, this is the 8th in our 12-part series. This is a topic of great practical value for those in the asset management community. Today's presentation will address an area of need that is widely recognized by many agencies, both in the context of Maryland and of agencies' broader asset management efforts. We'll hear from some very knowledgeable speakers who have a lot to share. Our presenters will offer practical insights and lessons for agencies just taking on these challenges, and also for those well-versed in these issues. Next slide, please. Before we go further, I want to address 3 key questions that are often raised in discussions of asset management and data. I will cover these briefly, but I encourage you to visit the FHWA Asset Management website, where there's much more information. The first question is, why is data so important to transportation asset management? You often hear me say, it's a framework, it's a process. But transportation asset management is data-intensive process that involves the gathering, retrieval, storage, analysis, and communication of enormous quantities of data. State DOTs spend a lot of money collecting data. In addition, MAP 21's definition of asset management emphasizes the importance of quality information. It states, asset management is a strategic and systematic process of operating, maintaining, and improving physical assets with a focus on engineering and economic analysis based upon quality information to identify a structured sequence of maintenance, preservation, repair, rehab, and replacement actions that will achieve and sustain a desired state of good repair over the life cycle of the asset at minimum practical cost. So that is very important. The next question, what role does data play in asset management? Well, you can find information on our website, or right in MAP 21, it talks about evaluate and monitor the condition and performance of the asset inventory. Data. Develop performance objectives and measures. Data. Identify cost-effective investment strategies. A final question is, what are key challenges and opportunities for data transportation asset management? We're going to hear more about this subject today, but 2 keys that I want to leave with you are transportation asset management crosses program areas, so data integration and sharing are critical. Transportation asset management requires a clear outlook. Data management must be aligned with agency business. And like all of you, I look forward to hearing our presenters today share their perspectives. One of the reasons events like today's webinar are so valuable is that they provide the asset management community with opportunities for collaboration and knowledge sharing. In that spirit, I'd like to remind you or bring to your attention the TRB 10th National Conference on Asset Management that will take place April 28th to 30th in Miami, Florida. Many of you will have this event on your calendars already, but for those of you who don't, I encourage you to attend the conference. It is supported by both Federal Highway and AASHTO, and as the Federal Highway liaison to the conference panel, I look forward to seeing you there. I want to turn it back to Yana Park of SpyPalm Partners to give an overview of today's webinar, review the agenda, and introduce our speakers. Yana?
Today we'll hear from 4 presentations on data needs, issues, governance for improved management of highway assets. The AASHTO TAM guide emphasizes the TAM requires data-driven, informed decision-making. Together, we'll explore the potential of data management to improve DOT asset management practice, and operational performance. Our presenters today will discuss agency efforts in identifying and addressing data issues impacting asset management decision-making. Presentations will highlight successful tools and approaches, key challenges, significant benefits achieved, and important lessons learned. As we mentioned previously, the purpose of this webinar series is to share lessons learned, ideas, and knowledge with the asset management community. For this webinar, the primary learning objectives are building working knowledge of key concepts and definitions relevant to asset management, data needs, issues, and governance, understanding specific approaches that agencies are taking to address these issues today, beginning to apply this knowledge in order to answer the following questions. Why is data so important? How does data enable better TAM results? And how are data and data management important in the context of MAP 21? I will introduce each speaker before each presentation, but in brief, our first presentation we'll hear from Omar Smadi of Iowa State University, who will give us a view on the topic of data and asset management. Our next presentation we'll hear from Ohio DOT with a presentation from Andrew Williams of Ohio DOT. Our third presentation we will hear from Greg Slater of the Maryland State Highway Administration, and our final presentation we have Peggy Knight of Iowa DOT. And just another reminder, the Q&A will be at the end, so please submit your comments using the webinar Q&A at the top bar anytime during today's presentation. First presentation from Omar Smadi of Iowa State University will be giving us the overview of our webinar topic today. Omar is a research scientist with the Center for Transportation Research and Education at Iowa State University. His area of interest includes asset management, data integration, non-destructive evaluation. Omar will share with us a presentation entitled Making Data Work in TAM Program. Omar.
Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Yana, for the introduction. As both Yana and Steve mentioned the importance of data, what I would like to do is kind of go through some slides talking about how data works in a transportation asset management program, but also talk about some of the challenges and the issues that agencies need to address in terms of data. All of you are familiar with MAP 21, so I don't need to go into that. But here are some interesting statistics. It's a pretty big legislation, 1,676 pages. You look at the legislation, it had mentioned safety 971 times, so we're assuming safety is pretty important. Performance, 369, and then it gets to data 361 times, condition, 171 times, performance measures, 41 times, and asset management is 40 times. As Steve said, this is a process that relies on data, but what you have to be careful with is data should not drive how we go about doing asset management. Data should support how we do asset management. From the legislation and the AASHTO guide on asset management, here are kind of the components of a TAM. We start with transportation asset management objectives, do an asset inventory and condition. That, of course, relies on data, and not just any data. It's good quality data that can be used to address decision-making and also allow the agency to tell a story in terms of how we manage the asset and where the needs are. We have to identify performance gaps. Life cycle costs will rely on data, historical information, and also future condition performance. Financial plan that needs financial information. One of the things that agency would struggle with a little bit is looking at their financial plan, estimating their revenue for an extended period of time as part of their transportation asset management plan. Investment strategies, here's how we're going to use the data, looking at existing conditions, looking at deterioration, looking at treatment strategies, looking at condition of the different assets that we have, and come up with an investment strategy that allows us to meet the goals and objectives that we set early on in terms of our transportation asset management plan. And then the last piece is management. How do we incorporate it into making decisions and into asset management? And that requires collecting data and understanding what risks we're considering, what's the context of that risk, what are the consequences, and also the probability or the possibility that those risks will take place. So all of these aspects in terms of a transportation asset management plan have very much relationships with the data that we have. Agencies will look at what they have, what the needs are, come up with a gap analysis in terms of the data, and then try to fill that gap by collecting additional information, or in some cases deciding that the cost of collecting that data does not really justify the questions or the answers we're going to get from that data, and then having to develop a strategy to address that. One of the things that I want to stress is not everything can be solved by collecting data, and we'll talk at the end about some of the challenges in terms of that. In a recent census, actually, the report was published last year on asset management practices. If we look at what agencies are collecting in terms of asset data, a lot of the agencies, of course, have inventory. When we look at pavements and bridges, we had 43 states that answered the survey, and all of them, of course, said pavements and bridges. There are national requirements for reporting pavement and bridge condition, so that wasn't a surprise. But if we look down the list, there are 33 out of 43 states that responded that said they're collecting sign information, 27 that collect guardrails, culverts, lighting, pavement markings, returning walls, and so on. All of this creates this huge data set that an agency has to manage, keep up to date, integrate, and link so we can start looking at comprehensive decision making, which is what asset management is all about. Next slide, please. So we don't want to be drowning in the data. We want to turn that data into information that agencies at the high level, technical level, mid-level, turn that data into information that can be used for decision making. So we're going to move from, having data and spreadsheets into more of a GIS integrated relational database. Next slide, please. And here's an example from some work that we have done for the Iowa DOT, where we took Interstate 80. We have the interchanges. We have the traffic on the interchanges. We have the pavement condition. We have the bridge condition. We have future needs in terms of replacing bridges. We have future needs in terms of adding capacity. All of that information becomes part of the decision-making process by taking separate data items that come from different sources and integrating that data so we can start doing corridor analysis. We start looking at comprehensive decision-making. We start looking at performance measures. Of course, with MAP 21, there are 7 national performance measures. Infrastructure condition is one of them. Safety is another, but then there is another slew of performance measures on the environment, performance measures on project delivery, performance measures on delay and congestion, and so on. All of that is going to require having the data, having the ability to turn that data into information, and then presenting that information in a way that can be understood by multiple stakeholders, either internal to the DOT or external to the DOT in terms of legislatures, in terms of the public, in terms of elected officials, and so on. Next slide, please. So when we're looking at assets, when we're talking about managing assets, that process starts early on. So this should start from the planning stage, goes into the design and construction, and then ends into the maintenance, rehabilitation, and reconstruction of those facilities. So an agency Of course, we don't have that luxury right now because we don't have agencies that are just starting new, but the process can be gradual. We have to keep planning data. We have to keep design and construction data, update that as, with as-built, and then continually manage that asset in terms of maintenance rehabilitation. All those data items become part of the process of managing that asset. And if we have a system that allows us to take that top tier, then go to the next tier, which is the operations. Operations will have an impact in terms of, we need to look at our traffic, we need to look at the reliability of travel time, and so on. So now we have the second piece in terms of operations, the third piece in terms of safety. All of these, in terms of how we manage an asset, all of these components have to be part of managing that asset. And all of that requires having the right data to support the management of that asset. Next, please. So when we're talking about asset management and we're talking about data, the question here is we want to collect data once and then use it many, many times for different functions. And I'm just showing here an example, where we have HPMS data, we have pavement data, bridge data, safety data, roadway data, MIRE or the minimum inventory road element data. All of that feeds into the asset management process. The point is a lot of these data sources exist. It's having the ability to actually access that data, work with that data, integrate and link that data so we can start looking at asset management comprehensively. Next slide, please. One of the things that I think Steve brought up early on, he said quality information. So one of the things that agencies will have to start looking at is the data quality. There is really nothing more accurate than when we say garbage in, garbage out. This applies very well, and not just asset management, but in terms of any process where we're looking at pavements, bridges, signs, or anything. We need quality data. That doesn't mean that agencies don't start collecting some information or some data, but we need to have a plan in terms of how we improve the quality of the data and how we manage that data quality. So the quality assurance process of the data that we collect as an agency becomes part of this process in terms of managing assets. One of the things that agencies should probably look at in terms of including risk as part of asset management is, what's the risk of having poor quality data? What if our condition information is plus minus 10% of what it actually is? That has a huge impact in terms of our investment strategy, in terms of our financial plan. How do we get to our performance targets that we set as an agency? So the quality of the data is very important. Agencies have to start looking at quality assurance as part of that process. I think there has been a project that was just completed on managing quality of the data that was funded by, I don't know if it was an NCHRP project or Federal Highway, but the report is out in terms of how agencies can start looking at the management and the quality of the data. Here is just an example. We're in charge of developing a roadway information database for the SHARP 2 safety study. We're collecting roadway data elements. We develop accuracy requirements for each one of those data elements. And then we have a quality assurance plan that guarantees when we get data, we can check that data and make sure it meets our accuracy requirements. How do we do that? We have 2 control sites that the data collection vendor would have to collect at the beginning of the project, every month while they're there. If there are changes in the equipment, if there are changes to the personnel that operate the equipment. And we also do random checks. I'm actually in North Carolina right now because it's one of our NDS sites, or Natural Driving Study site, and we're collecting random points over the network where the vendor is collecting data to double check the accuracy of the information that they're providing. So that QA plan has to become part of any data collection effort so we can have confidence in the data that we're collecting. And when we start making decisions in terms of how much money we invest to achieve a performance target, we have confidence in presenting that information to the decision makers. Next, please. We also communication in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. So having a data collection manual, having an understanding of what each data item really means. And that's one of the things that agencies will struggle with because everybody has been doing it their own way. There is an effort at the national level to standardize some of the definition of, pavement distresses or protocols in terms of how we collect data and so on. We have 50 states plus territories. Everybody kind of seems want to do it their own way. There is definitely a lot of benefits to having standard definitions for certain important items, especially ones that would become part of the notice of proposed rulemaking in terms of how we measure condition and how we measure performance. So having that communication, having that understanding of what a data item really means, how do we collect it, how do we report it, what its accuracy requirements, what its reporting interval, and so on, becomes part of this data collection manual that agencies have to maintain, update, and manage their data collection based on. Next. Integration of data is the last piece in terms of the critical component to putting different sources of information together, so we start looking at the entire picture. Here is an image of a corridor where we look at curvature information for safety analysis. We have a sign inventory. We have an intersection inventory. We have right-of-way video. All of this information can be integrated together, so a decision maker, a technical person, a field person have direct access to that information so they can start using the data. It's our belief that data that are used as part of the decision-making process would be good quality data because there are multiple sets of eyes on it. People are utilizing it and using it. That means we get the data checked, we get it verified through that process. Next. So there are a lot of ongoing efforts in terms of federal highway, with the emphasis on transportation asset management plan. Data is going to play a major role in that. The performance measures, we cannot report on performance measures without having proper data. The HPMS, that might be the vehicle for how we report on some of the performance measures. Federal Highway and the safety area has established programs in terms of having roadway data to support the safety analysis with the Roadway Data Improvement Program, MIRE, the Model Inventory Roadway Elements, and as part of MAP 21, there is a subset of MIRE called the Fundamental Data Elements, or FDE. I think there are 36 or 38 elements on the roadway itself, on the intersection, on the interchanges, that it's the belief of Federal Highway and the safety program. Those are critical elements to do more in terms of the safety analysis and also in terms of the performance measures. So all of these, there has to be some concerted effort to start standardizing, to start learning from the lessons for each one of those programs, and start spreading the word in terms of how state agencies can manage their data, improve their quality to support decision making. Next, please. My last slide is lessons learned, and I've been dealing with data issues for quite some time. Worked with Federal Highway on the data integration workshop. We're developing, as I said, this roadway information database for SHARP 2. We're working with Federal Highway Office of Safety on doing the roadway data improvement programs for states. One of the main things is location, location, location. As they say in real estate, it's the same thing for data. We have to have a location component to allow us to integrate that data, to allow us to relate data from different sources. Data quality is next. Good quality data is necessary and critical to make good decisions. Again, the garbage in, garbage out principle. We have to have this realization that there is no one reliable source of data. Data is going to come from different sources, so the integration of that data becomes critical. Coordination and communication. Multiple stakeholders play a huge role in data, whether it's within the DOT, multiple offices, or data that comes from outside the DOT. Like if it's a Department of Motor Vehicle where they have registration, where they have the crash data, or Department of Finance, or so on. That our data that will be used for decision making will definitely, I guarantee you, will come from multiple sources. So that coordination and communication in terms of what we're collecting and how we're collecting it to meet multiple objectives is going to be very important. One of the things that state DOTs will have to deal with is the fact that some of the national highway system, or the expanded NHS as part of MAP 21, is under different jurisdictions, cities and counties and POs, and the state DOTs have to report on it, not just report the condition, but also have a performance target. So we have to communicate, we have to coordinate, we have to establish processes and procedures that allow us to be consistent. The last thing I want to talk about is the technology. And I don't want to really talk about, how to manage data and how to collect data, but agencies have to be aware of the technology, whether it's accessing the information, whether it's the collection of that information, storage of that information, and the last thing is cost. Data is going to be costly. And part of this process that we have to go through is trying to determine what's feasible and what's not, what supports decision-making, and what's really a bonus in terms of getting data. What data can we collect that can be cost-effective, can be accurate, and support the decision-making process? That's what we should focus on. Technology exists that allows us to collect a lot of this information. But what is really critical, what's needed to manage our assets, what's needed to meet the requirements of MAP 21, and what do we have and where is the gap? And let's try to address that in a gradual and a comprehensive fashion so we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time we try to manage an asset. And I think that ends my presentation, Yana, and I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Omar. So our next presentation is from Andrew Williams of Ohio DOT, who will share with us ODOT's asset management data for decision making. Andrew is the administrator of the Office of Technical Services at the Ohio Department of Transportation. He's responsible for infrastructure management, overseeing various operations such as geospatial information systems, the HPMS, traffic monitoring, and asset management. Andrew is a 20-year transportation professional with ODOT, previously working in the areas of traffic, pavement management, innovation, and energy. He has over 15 years of experience in the area of asset management and transportation systems development, designing numerous training courses on management systems. Andrew has designed and implemented several of the infrastructure systems being utilized by the department and collaborated on others, which has distinguished Ohio as one of the best in infrastructure data collection and analysis. And now I'll turn it over to Andrew.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Omar, this is a great presentation that you gave, and actually a good lead-in to what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about how we have evolved here in terms of management of our data to support asset management decisions here in Ohio. First thing I want to share with you is ODOT's road inventory system. Just kind of give you a sense of what we're dealing with here. We have over 121,000 centerline miles of roads here in the state of Ohio that's a public road. As you know, in MAP 21, we are to have a certified LRS, location referencing system for all 121,000 miles in terms of the state of Ohio. Also, that includes over 5 million entries of attribute data in 88 counties, anything from lane widths to shoulder widths and all kinds of things like that. We also, to keep us with the official location referencing system, we have a base transportation referencing system that we utilize to actually tie different business data together and tie it to the location or location referencing system. And all that supports the highway performance monitoring system. Next slide, please. To get our hands around this enormous amount of data, to be able to make use of it, we established an asset management leadership team. That leadership team has 3 levels. The asset management leadership team level at the very bottom of that pyramid there, that's a pretty big group, multidisciplinary group. They represent the business. These are the folks who are actually responsible for the day-to-day management of that particular asset. Then we have the executive level. That is comprised of our district and central office deputy directors and administrators who are responsible for management and overseeing those different business operations. And then our policy level. That's where our director and assistant directors actually reside. So what we have is we have the ability to actually communicate up needs and things and trends and performance metrics. But at the same time, we have our executive level people who are buying into the same process and initiative who are actually sending information down and setting policy. Next slide, please. Back in 2010, to try to make sure we got buy-in, this group got together with the help of some facilitators, and we came up with a set of recommendations. And I'm going to focus in on recommendation number 3. Recommendation number 3 was develop a centralized asset management platform for integration of all asset inventory databases to reside in a geospatial environment. So this was one of the recommendations that came out of that group, and this is one of the recommendations that is framing or has framed our charter. Next slide, please. Our asset management leadership team charter, one of the items here that we're charged with is to provide data governance in terms of developing data standards, data collection procedures and processes, and promoting the use of enterprise-level information. The one thing that I will tell you from the experience that we've gone through so far, having some structure to this whole data piece is key to making it work. What you'll find, what you probably found in your own state, is that you have different business owners or stakeholders who have siloed repositories of information. What we've decided to do was to go and standardize, come up with a bunch of standards in and around the different business units, so that our data was enterprise level. We have identified a business owner for each asset. That business owner is responsible for in the asset management leadership team, and also for helping us to actually develop the standards. The other part of it is that we have a huge collaboration piece. That collaboration piece creates a forum for all the different business owners to hear what that particular business owner is talking about in relation to managing that asset. For example, the bridge department may want to establish new collection criteria in terms of the type of information they would collect. They may not have ever known that the people in planning needed some additional information. By having this particular forum and this asset management leadership team, we can vet through those types of scenarios and come up with a very good standard for collecting the information in and around those assets. Next slide, please. To get us there, we brought in Katie Zimmerman from Applied Pavement Technology to come in and kind of help facilitate. What I found out real quick was that the message I was trying to deliver wasn't really the problem. It was probably just me, the messenger. So I decided to bring a neutral third party in to kind of help us go through and kind of set some context in and around what we were trying to do. Here on this particular spider diagram, what you'll see is the blue area represents where we are on a scale from 0 to 5 in terms of our maturity regarding the different components of asset management. The one item I'm going to focus in on here is data and systems. As you can see, Ohio, we rated about a 2 in terms of data and systems. And we're saying that we want to go up to a 5, and we think that it's going to take about a 2 to 3 year period. So we're aggressively working there. So one of the things I would encourage all of you as you're going through this process, find out how mature you really are and actually put some governance to the things that you're trying to do. Next slide, please. Also, what we did as part of this assessment, we did a maturity assessment. We also did the TAM assessment that was in the ASTO guide, but also we went a step further. We had some differences of opinions in terms of what asset inventories we should even collect. What data should we collect to support this initiative? So what we did, we went on a risk-based analysis, basically drilling down to what assets, based off risk, should be represented or should be pulled in and collected based off a tiering structure. Tier 1s mean they were the most important based off risk, all the way down to Tier 3. And this matrix here, which is ultimately going to be a part of our risk, asset registry once we put our asset management plan together, identifies those asset types that we're very interested in collecting. Some of them we already have, some of them we're in the process of collecting, but we have a tier beside them. We also identify whether or not there was a centralized inventory already. We identify the collection method, the collection update cycle, and who the owner of that is, sponsoring office, and then a few additional information in terms of cost benefit and other resources required to make this work. This is a living document that we update as we actually go through. And what we've done is we apply standards in and around each one of these assets. It gets vetted through, circulated around through everybody on the asset management leadership team to provide comment on, and then it becomes our standard for that particular asset. Next slide, please. Ultimately, where we're trying to get to, and we're getting there, is a dynamic integration of enterprise business systems. We're utilizing our GIS technology, primarily the Esri products, to be able to make this work. So what we have here, we have all our business systems and all of our business data. We're actually bringing these in, we're going to be utilizing roads and highways to actually do the updates locational-wise to the actual data. So we've established the standards, we've established the procedures for data collection. We're bringing that data into an environment where we can actually update the locational information, complete with temporality. And then we're creating something that's a little bit different than what a lot of people think about in terms of data. We're creating what we call summary files. So envision this, the business owner data, when it comes in, that's the authoritative data. We're going to then take the data, migrate it over into a geodatabase and create what we call a summary file. That summary file would be a dynamic segmentation or combination of the business owner data, the road inventory, and some other associated attributes such as traffic and some other things that we have already identified. They will be stored in a geodatabase, and we can extract and load and transfer those over where we need to for other applications. So what that gives us the ability to do is to apply the BI on the back end to the authoritative data, but also have the geospatially referenced data in the geodatabase for anything that's GIS related. Next slide, please. You heard Omar talk about data, data, data. I'm showing you a life cycle of asset management. There is really no life cycle without data, without information. From the start, from the planning piece, all the way through design, construction, and ultimately the maintenance part and the feedback piece, everything hinges on data, or more specifically, information. Next slide. I'm going to give you a little demonstration here. It's going to be a little bit fuzzy. I couldn't clean this up really well, but basically what you're looking at is a tool that we've developed, a prototype, by which that gives us the ability to go in, click on any section of roadway, any bridge, any kind of asset in the state of Ohio. And on this example, we're going through and clicking on a certain section of roadway, and we're going to click the different assets that we have the enterprise inventory data for, and it actually will tell us all the different information that's actually, all the asset information that's actually in that particular area, or in between that those points of reference. This is a prototype that we're building. The gist of it was to show that we could actually integrate all this data together once we had the data governance in and around this particular asset information. So we're showing pavers, bridges, we're showing culverts, we're showing barriers, guardrail, and those kind of things. We're showing how much we have in those particular areas. We can also show the condition of those particular assets if we have condition data at any point along that transportation system. This was a huge step for us, and it allows us so much flexibility to do some very, very neat things. On the next example here, we're going to bring in the GIS portion of it, and what we're going to do is we're going to actually click on a section of roadway, and we're going to pull up and show what's actually in that particular area. Before that, this is just a condition assessment, again, going through and just looking at payments, for example. So here's a pie chart that tells us the different condition levels. The blue is extremely good. The orange is fair going to poor. And we can click on that particular pie chart, pull up the sections of roadway that make up that particular pie chart, what the condition is, what the location information is at. The next thing that we're going to do is actually go in and actually look at the map from a GIS standpoint and actually pull up those sections of roadway again. And then by a simple point and click, we can look and see all this data that's actually integrated in and around that particular asset on that section of roadway. So here is actually pulling up the condition based off the color codes. Again, blue being very good, red being extremely poor, green being fair, and then yellow is fair, good to fair. So we're going to click on a deficient section of roadway, which is actually in red. We're going to pin that. And off to the right-hand side over there, that's all the data for that section of roadway in terms of condition, traffic, easels, and all sorts of different information for that section of roadway. Next slide, please. So our next steps, we're going to develop our transportation asset management plans. We've already given that contract to Applied Pavement Technology. That kicks off in February. We're replacing what we call our current base transportation referencing system. That's where, again, we're able to sync up and reconcile all of our different asset information to the most current LRS. And we're going to replace that with Esri Roads and Highways. We're going to implement what we call TAM, Transportation Information Mapping System, Phase 2. Phase 1 was a huge success, and I would encourage you, if you want to, go out on the Ohio Department of Transportation website and just do a search on TAMS and take a look at that application. It's a really neat GIS application that's helping us manage our assets. And we're going to actually develop a data dictionary, kind of going along the same lines as Omar when he was talking about a manual. We're going to be creating a manual and a data dictionary, making sure that all the nomenclatures are all standardized. And then we're going to strengthen our relationships with our locals, trying to make sure, again, with the expanded NHS and things like that, we want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So that asset management leadership team, we've actually included the MPOs and the locals to participate in that asset management leadership team for that purpose. And with that, that's the end of my presentation, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Andrew. Our next presentation is from the Maryland State Highway Administration. Greg Slater is the Director of the Office of Planning and Preliminary Engineering at the Maryland SHA. His career has focused on data-driven decision support coupled with performance management. Through his leadership, he has Maryland focus on sustainability, climate change, linking of planning and safety, GIS-based asset data warehousing for a comprehensive asset management approach, and multimodal planning solutions that focus on community and industry input. He is currently serving on the AASHTO Standing Committee on Planning Leadership Team as co-chair of the Scopes Data Subcommittee and is also on the Oversight Board for the Census Transportation Planning Products. Greg is going to speak to us about Maryland SHA's data warehouse and has a demo plan for us. In order to see the data, we suggest that you press F5, which puts you into full screen mode, which will make it easier for you to see Greg's demo. Now I'll turn it over to Greg.
Great, thank you. And our presentation actually feeds very well into the previous presentation. It seems like a lot of the states are doing relatively the same thing, some in different orders and some in different levels of implementation. So you can go ahead to the next slide. I'm going to talk a little bit about our asset management program as a whole, and then I'm going to turn it over to Laurie and Joe, and we're actually going to be a live demo of our asset data warehouse, which is a geospatial enterprise system that integrates all of our asset data. So this is really the asset management framework directly out of the AASHTO guide that we follow. We're developing the TAMPs in a lot of our assets right now. Some of our more mature assets in terms of their programs, our pavement and bridges, our drainage structures, we're getting there on things like line striping and highway lighting and signals. Those are moving along. But what we've done is really establish a data-driven process across the board so that we can not only look at these assets individually, but look across the assets and understand what the goal is, what the data is telling us, as well as look it up and down a corridor and understand where the life cycles are on each of these assets and work through our programmatic that way. You can go to the next slide. So this is really that we use, and of particular importance, you'll look at the columns, the two columns directly to the right of fund manager, we have all of our assets in this asset matrix, and it really kind of guides our process. So when we're looking to set up a new program, because really we work in individual asset programs, so some of these assets and the management of these assets is throughout the organization. So there's not really one entity that does them all, and that's much like any DOT. So as we work with these asset owners on their asset management programs and think about them programmatically, the first thing we do is really sit down with them, discuss how their asset's going to be managed. We start getting the outline of the framework of what their TAMP is going to look like and really kind of work through that process. At the same time, we establish a process where they're going to manage the data associated with that asset. So the asset owners themselves actually manage the data associated with the asset as well. And that's a really important point. So if we don't establish that data process and get the tools and everything we need to do in place, then what happens is that you collect that inventory, the process isn't set, and the data becomes outdated very quickly. So the idea for us is to integrate the data management into the business practice, collect it once, and work on it dynamically as we go through and integrate with our activities. You can go ahead to the next slide. This is a screenshot of our data inventory. This one shows a variety of assets. We have it overlaid with the aerial imagery here. We can go in a variety of backgrounds there, but the idea with the enterprise system is to really kind of work through all the different types of data together, as well as be able to pull in. The asset data warehouse in particular is connected with our asset or our enterprise GIS system. So you can not only look at the asset data, you can pull in the safety data, congestion data, the data from the other performance elements of the program if you need to, and kind of work with that data together if you need to get out of the asset data warehouse, which is really designed to manage the asset data itself. You can go ahead to the next slide. So this is a great example of our web-based editing. This is directly in the asset data warehouse. So the asset owners can go in, add new assets, edit their inventory, change conditions, things along that line. We only want the asset owners to be the ones changing the asset conditions. We're working right now, and we've got a few different irons in the fire in terms of how to interact with the maintenance data. At the same time, we actually just deployed a tremendous amount of iPads to our maintenance crews on electronic work orders, and they're working through the processes we're working on. In the future, we want to be able to link that back up and have that sync back and forth, so have that communication. You know, for instance, our bridge folks, they don't necessarily want anybody editing their data, but they want to know what you did to the bridge. So being able to kind of bring that together and work through that in one system where you can really look at that. You can go to the next slide. This is another one that really kind of gets to the snapshot in terms of the reporting. You can look at the different assets and signs, and this one in particular is associated with signs, total number of assets. We break it down by shop because they're managed at a shop level in terms of condition, and then we work through them, and they're able to kind of get those assessments and work through that as well. You can go to the next one. Now I have Laurie and Joe. They're going to jump in, and they're going to give us a good live demo of our system, so she's going to have to take over the screen here for a second.
Hi, my name is Laurie Gowdy. I am the Aegis Web Application Manager, and I have here with me Joe Badena, who is the Asset Manager here. And now I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to pull up our Aegis Web Application. So this is a web application built in Flex using ArcGIS Server and REST services that stores all of our valuable SHA data, and it allows us to disseminate that to our population internally here, so all of our users are using the most current data to make those data-driven decisions. You'll notice here that I am logged in to Aegis as an asset editor, and I'm also a refresher. So we've built in permissions and groups and roles to this system here, so our editors have permissions to create, edit, and delete assets, and those who don't have permissions at least view that data and match it up with other data sets in the system. So I'm going to hit OK here. This is the lighting editor, and it has a couple tabs up top: selection, results, reports, and refresh. You always start out on the selection screen. I'm going to do a selection in Baltimore County here in Maryland, and I'm going to do a search by route number. I'm going to look for an interstate road, IS 83, And as I pull down these drop-down menus, everything pre-populates as data-driven off of the centerline table. So here I've selected Interstate 83, and it's selected a portion of that road based on beginning and ending mile points from our LRS. I'm going to go ahead and hit select. You'll notice in the background that it's kind of zoomed me into the Baltimore County here, and it's selected this route, 83. And then it brings back some returns for IS-83. I'm going to go ahead and select the first one, which is the northbound direction of IS-83. And then it shows in this panel down here on the bottom the different structures of lighting. It's down 3 structures, 1 panel, and 23 poles. I'm going to go ahead and select the poles. And here, again, I'll have a number of attributes and spatial records for those poles. And as I select a pole, it zooms me into that area on the map, and you can see here it's highlighted with a dark blue square in the center of it. And as I select the pole, it gives me pole information on the right-hand side. This pole's in Hereford Shop off of exit 23. And as I scroll down, I can see that it has 1 light. The bulb type is HPF. And it was created in 2009, and we last updated this on December 3rd of 2013. So as an editor, I have the capability to change the information here. I can add new poles, delete, and also move. I'll show you how the move function works. If I select the move function, I have a cursor screen that pops up. It says click to add point. I can move the location of that pole. And as I select a different area on the map, it's going to associate that pole with a route and a mile point. So in my screen up here for Move Asset, it's going to associate it with IS-83 and then the nearest mile point. And then I have the capability to change it to a different route or change it to a different mile point location. And that's how you can associate or move a pole or associate with a different route. I'm going to go ahead and cancel this because I don't want to update the data at this time. And I'm going to say no. Yes. Are you sure you want to cancel? Yes. And that brings me back to the lighting editor. The third tab is our reports. As I select report screen, we can generate reports by the district, with 7 districts, SHA, by county or by shop. And then we also have some other predefined reports that you can run. I'm going to show you a report that we generated for poles. This is looking at the summary of LED conversions. So SHA is converting our lighting to LED bulbs, and for a district, you can get the report by the districts, and it will give you the percentage of the conversion, the total number of lights and poles in that area, and so forth. Just to give you a little bit more background about our Aegis web application. Our content is divided into our offices, so planning and engineering, operations, and finance. And under the asset data warehouse, these are the various assets that we have in the application. At any one time, users can mash up by using this custom button here. They can mash up different content themes. And we have other data sets in here as well. For instance, all of our SHA projects or our pavement data, IRI, our financial data, and our CTP data. So there's a plethora of data sets in here that the users have at their fingertips to make those important decisions. And that concludes our demo, and I will share back the screen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Greg and Lori. That was a great demo. It's nice to have live demos both from Ohio and Maryland today. Our final presentation is from Iowa DOT. Peggy Knight is going to speak to us about the evolution of asset management and data governance at Iowa DOT. Peggy is the director of the Office of Research and Analytics, and she has held this position for 1 year and was previously the director of the Office of Transportation Data for 10 years. She's a member of the TRB Statewide Transportation Data and Information Systems Committee and also the GIS and Applications Committee. Now let's give our attention to Peggy.
Okay, thank you. So in Iowa, like most DOTs, we have many legacy systems that were built to support business processes. And in the 1990s, we set out on a very difficult process to build the linear referencing system to be able to bring all the data together from all those legacy systems. We included all the public roads in Iowa in that system, which is 114,000 miles of road. And we focused beginning on the primary network with the DOT roads. So throughout that process, we have been able to bring all the roads into the LRS. And then in 2013, we started using the LRS just more to start using it in business systems throughout the agency. There's still some key systems in the agency that are not necessarily fully leveraging the LRS, but we're getting there. So, and then we have a new management focus on data governance. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. Next slide, please. So the benefits of our LRS are that we are able to more readily use the data throughout the agency together. It improves the analysis, leading to data-driven decisions. The quality, timeliness, and efficiency of the data is better. Better data integration, data access. We improve the accuracy of the data throughout the LRS process. It minimizes the redundancy in the DOT data systems and data maintenance activities. Like I said before, it includes all the public roads in Iowa. And then the LRS also includes a temporal process where we were able to go back and forth in time. So the accidents are all located on the system where they actually happened, because we were able to say, I want to see the system as it was on a certain date. Next slide, please. Go ahead. So this just gives an example of some of the applications that we can use because we have all the public roads in the system. This is a safety application where we have been able to analyze all the public roads and to be able to determine where the eligible corridors are for improvements. Next slide, please. So then we're also able to do further analysis and say where are the top 15% of eligible corridors in the state. And, you know, since all the roads are in the LRS, that allows us to do this analysis on all the roads in the system. Next slide, please. This is actually a new application that just went to the public. This is showing where all the snowplows are in the state. So you're able to click on each of those little orange dots and get the information about the roadway at that location. So the air surface temperature, the road surface temperature, the speed of that plow, and then also you can get information about, you know, what chemicals they're putting down and which plows they're using. So it's actually very nice because it's overlaid on top of the 511 system. You can see in the background that the roads are color-coded based on whether their condition of the roads for winter weather driving. Next slide, please. We also have an internal GIS portal that allows us to bring all the data together into one place. It includes project history, some of the LiDAR information, aerial photography, the projects that are programmed, and there's lots more information in there. The HVMS information is in there. The traffic information is in it. So it includes a lot of information from throughout the agency. Next slide, please. This just shows all of the structurally deficient bridges in Iowa. So obviously you can see that there's a lot of them. We have 25,000 bridges in the system, and so then this has been used to help people to understand the condition of those bridges throughout the state. As you can see, the yellow triangles are those that are posted, and the X's are those that are closed, and you can't really see really well which are which, but you can at least see that there's a lot of bridges there. Next slide, please. And this is just showing all of the public roads. So all of the roads that are on this slide are in the LRS system. Next slide. Go ahead. So what's been happening with the asset management program at Iowa DOT? In 2011, our director appointed a TAM champion to spearhead the implementation, and a committee was formed to develop that, implementation plan. And it became clear that we needed some organizational structure to support the system. Go ahead to the next slide. So I'll just have to click again. So this just shows you, previous to the reorganization of the DOT, that asset management was spread throughout the agency. And so this was kind of the organizational structure before, and then go ahead to the next slide. So then the Performance and Technology Division was created in 2012 in order to try to bring asset management together into one place. Obviously, we're still going to have asset management in locations throughout the agency, but at least it gives us the opportunity to organize it all from a central location. We also incorporated into that new division organizational improvement, strategic communications, and research and analytics. And the goal of the organization is smarter, simpler, and customer-driven, and this is just aligning that. Go ahead. So this is what the new Performance and Technology Division looks like. We have a section on organizational improvement, which includes performance management, asset management, strategic planning, and process improvement. Strategic communications includes the web development, public information, social media. And then in research and analytics is we have the analytics for the agency, business intelligence, and the agency research program. Go ahead. And again, thank you. Okay, so how do we deal with data integration throughout the agency? We're forming a new committee to look at enterprise data management, just trying to do some additional data governance from what we currently have. And then we have good policies and procedures, and we have a new GIS policy, and it gives us specific standards, but also tries to allow some flexibility for people. But people have to actually follow the policies in order to make this work. And then also we're focusing in on analytics, and we've developed the processes to start analyzing some of the data in a more detailed way. Go ahead. Okay. So that's all I had.
Thanks, Peggy. That concludes our presentations for today, and now let's move on to the Q&A part of the webinar. So we have 2 questions so far. If any of you have additional questions, please type them in and we'll answer them. Andrew, are you on the phone? Andrew,
yes, I'm in my car now. Can you hear me okay?
Okay, excellent. Good. The 2 questions we have so far are for you. The first one is from Jack Stickle from Alaska. Jack is asking, is there a transportation asset management maturity model analysis that's available to other agencies? The spider visualization really speaks to where you are. Andrew?
Okay, I didn't totally hear that. Could you repeat that one more time?
So Jack is asking if there is a kind of a maturity model that was used to develop your spider diagram, and is that available for other states to use?
Yes, but it was done. We brought in Katie Zimmerman from Applied Technology, and she actually did the maturity assessment.
Yep.
So if you contacted Applied Payment Technology, they would probably have a template. But that's that's what we.
Was that using the one that's in the TAM guide, Volume 2?
Yes.
Who knows? Okay. Yep. All right. The second question is also for you, Andrew, which is would you be willing to provide a table of organization that outlines all three levels of the asset management leadership team at the individual employee level? So he's asking for a org chart.
Yep, not a problem.
Okay, so that's something that maybe we can get Matt to post. This question is from Ted Daly, so we can make the connection. So briefly describe your costs in terms of staff time as well as financial costs in developing your data warehouse GIS application.
Okay, so there's a couple of different components to understand there. We had developed our enterprise GIS system over a couple of years and kind of working through that. And really, the cost was our staff time. We had some in-house folks working on it, kind of working with everybody and then getting the data where it needed to be. We had a group that was specifically focused on the data. And then when we undertook the asset data warehouse, we were able to build the asset data warehouse essentially on the GIS platform and use that as a base. When we developed the asset data warehouse, the initial investment was around $600,000. But it's continuing to evolve. We probably put about $300,000 or $400,000 a year into our asset data warehouse, and that is for a variety of functions. It's for data collection, it's for development of tools for the asset owners, it's for enhancements to the system, it's for all of the above. So it's a tough question to answer, like an all-inclusive type thing. Our initial investments, we probably put about $500,000 a year into it, and the initial investment was about $700,000.
Thanks, Greg. We have another question from Imad from Mississippi DOT. So his question is, most of us know that maintaining the quality of asset data is often acknowledged as problematic but critical to effective asset management. With this in mind, what are some of the key factors that a DOT should focus on that influences data quality when managing assets?
Asset as well.
What?
Treating data like the asset. So if you're managing the bridge assets for the state, you need to manage the bridge asset data as part of that, making it part of their business process.
Any of the other presenters would like to weigh in on this question? Omar?
Yes. Part of this process was completely in terms of looking at the quality of the data. As I don't know who was answering right now, is managing that side of the data as it's an asset. Because without that data, you really don't have a good way of managing the physical asset. So that part of, sometimes some agencies, and even if we look at Europe and Australia and New Zealand, the data itself is an asset that needs to be managed as part of the asset management process. So I fully agree with whoever answered for me in terms of dealing with that data as an asset, that we should manage the quality, manage the access, manage the storage, and manage the collection of that data.
Any other presenters? All right. Oh, Peggy?
Yeah, the only thing that I would add to that is that the more your data gets used, the better it's going to be. So, make sure you put it out there and people are using it, and then they're going to be able to help you to improve it.
Thanks, Peggy. All right, we have another question. This one, I think, is for you, Steve. It's from Carolyn, and she says, is October 2015 a firm date for the TAM? I thought it was after the rulemaking, which knowledge hasn't been done yet.
Everything depends on how quickly we're able to have the notice of proposed rulemaking in the Federal Register, and then the comments, addressing the comments, and issuing the final rule. the final rule needs to be issued before October 1, 2014. And if we make that deadline, then takes effect October 1, 2015. At this point, we're still shooting for the October 1, 2015. The state to be required to have the process for the asset management plan, but everything has to fall together.
The conference is now in silent mode.
All right, so now let's go back to the next 4 webinars. Our next one will be on March 12th on developing transportation asset management plan. At this webinar, we'll be featuring the 3 pilot projects plus another plan, as well as a new tool that's being developed to help states build their TAM based on existing TAM. We're going to change the frequency and go to June for the next one, because in May 2014, there are going to be 4 webinars following the Asset Management Conference that's going to be open to everyone. So we thought that it would be better to wait until those 4 were completed, and then we would have the next webinar on June 11th. And we are going to continue the risk and asset management topic. We did that last June, I think, and so we will expand upon what was done last time. And again, we have not selected the presentations for that webinar, so if there are very specific things you're curious about related to risk and asset management, please let Steve Gay at Federal Highway, Matt Hardy at AASHTO, or me know, and we can add that to the agenda. In August, we will be talking about managing off-system assets. This was a hot topic at the last Asset Management Peer Exchange in Burlington, and I think many states are very concerned about this. So we're going to try to have a webinar on things people are doing to do this better. And then the final one will be in October, and that will be Transportation Asset Management Financial Plan. So again, just if you want to see the presentations, they will be posted in a few days on the tam.transportation.org, and click on Webinars tab, and you'll see both the presentation and the audio for the meeting. And thank you for participating, and we'll see you in, goodbye.